I join colleagues across the House in welcoming this long overdue bill and share their dismay at the delay in implementing a ban on no-fault evictions. Renters have been left with soaring rents, repairs and at the complete mercy of landlords, powerless under the current system of no-fault evictions to demand fair rents and humane living conditions. And this is a massive housing emergency. Across the country, renters of all ages and backgrounds, from students to families to young couples and single retirees, are struggling to pay their rent, let alone save for a deposit to buy. Only half of private renters have any savings in their name. With the desperate lack of social housing, Liverpool alone has over 15,000 applicants on the council's housing register and almost 1,000 households in temporary accommodation. Frontline housing options and homeless service is seeing nearly 400 new approaches a month. Councils are now relying on the private rented sector as the only way to ease these pressures on the system, and renters are left with no viable options. We have an entire generation that has been betrayed by the Tories' 13 years of austerity and rising rents, frozen wages and diminishing opportunities. On top of this, they've been faced with an unprecedented challenges caused by the financial crash, recessions, the pandemic and now the cost of living crises. 13 years of Tory attacks on workers and tenant rights have left renters facing soaring insecurity and plummeting conditions. We urgently need this bill to pass through into law to begin to redress some of the worst impacts of this deregulation. It's been nearly 5 years since the government proposed to outlaw them and give renters some desperately needed protection from exploitative landlords. Since then, we have heard 70,000 households have been threatened with homelessness by Section 21 notices. Homelessness has skyrocketed during the last year, with the number of households in England who became homeless or who were at risk of homeless up 7% in the year to March. Each day that we delay, 172 families are handed a no-fault eviction notice, and we cannot wait for improvements in the courts. Renters need protection now. In my constituency, as across the country, we have increasingly seen that private landlords are using these no-fault evictions to turf out tenants on fixed-term contracts in order to hike up rents in line with soaring market rates. Not content with waiting out the year or 2-year-long contracts to raise rents and bolster profits, landlords are taking advantage of the cost of living crisis to line their pockets, while tenants are turfed out with nowhere to go. Citizens' Advice has found that a shocking 46% of renters who complain about their conditions receive a Section 21 notice within 6 months. And research by Shelter has supported this, with their findings showing that private renters in England who complain about poor conditions are 2.5 times more likely to be handed an evictions notice. Ending the pernicious Section 21 evictions is a major step in rebalancing power in favour of tenants. But there are a number of areas where we need to go further to make sure that current measures in the bill have the intended consequences, as called for by the Renters Reform Coalition of the 20 leading housing organisations. Firstly, we must increase the notice period from 2 months to at least 4 months, a move that will drastically reduce the number of people made homeless as a result of evictions. And we must also protect renters from eviction for the first 2 full years of tenancy, not the 6 months that is presently proposed. We must introduce strong safeguards to prevent the abuse of the new grounds of the eviction, including financial incentive for tenants to prevent abuse and a 1-year ban on reletting a property after invoking new landlord circumstances on the grounds for eviction. Courts must be given maximum discretion to identify reasons why an eviction should not take place. A cap on in-tenancy and rent increases in line with inflation and wage growth must be introduced to prevent unaffordable rent increases being used as a way to evict tenants via the back door. And lastly, we need action to raise local housing allowance in line with inflation to prevent renters on benefits from being penalised by rising rents, and local authorities must be given extra financial support to take action on rogue landlords. Everyone deserves a safe and secure home. The government must bring this bill into law immediately with the additional safeguards that members have outlined here today to deliver desperately needed robust legislation that protects renters. Thank you, Madam Deputy.